Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and if you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I am super excited for this episode. This has been a long time coming for me to talk about this, and I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait, patiently waiting. If you don't know, if you've been under a rock, you know that this Friday, July the 26th, I believe is the 20th. Yeah, the 26th will be the release of Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine. Yes, you heard me right. Marvel Studios. This marks the first time we're going to get mutants in the MCU officially. Yes, we've had some sprinkles. You know, they've retconned Miss Marvel to be a mutant. We saw Charles Xavier in the Multiverse of Madness in that alternate universe. We saw Beast in the end credits of Miss Marvel, or which one was it? The Marvels, just this past year. And so we've had sprinkles, but we never had an official X-Men a la mutant movie in the MCU. And a lot of that was because of the rights issues, and Fox, 20th Century Fox owned the rights to the X-Men and mutants. They couldn't even use, you realize the MCU couldn't even use the term mutants? They couldn't use it. That's why at one point they were pushing for the Inhumans in the MCU, and we end up getting that awful TV show a few years back, but they did not have the rights to mutants. But all that changed just a few years ago when Disney bought 20th Century Fox, which meant that the rights to the X-Men, as well as the Fantastic Four, by the way, which is coming out next year, those rights went back to Marvel. And now we get to play in the mutant sandbox. You know, that's how we got X-Men 97 on Disney Plus because of this. And everybody has been clamoring for the X-Men to enter the MCU, to enter this cinematic universe proper. But it didn't happen right off the bat. And I wasn't expecting it to. As much as I've been waiting and hoping and wishing and praying, I understand. Marvel has planned out their movies for years down the line. So we couldn't just shoehorn in Wolverine. We couldn't shoehorn in Cyclops into these films. We had to give them a proper introduction into the MCU. And so I got all of that. I think it was the combination of the MCU in their films not living up to par in the past couple of years, ever since Endgame, to be honest with you. Yes, we had some nuggets. We had some good movies, but they've been few and far between. You know, yeah, you had Spider-Man No Way Home, which was excellent. Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings was good. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was good. That's about it. it wasn't firing on all cylinders. And the Disney Plus shows, they were all right, but they weren't quite there. You know, it didn't have that same magic that we got in the first three phases of the MCU. And so the perfect thing to kind of jolt some life into this cinematic universe would be mutants. You know, something new, something different, something fresh. You know, because we've seen Iron Man, we multiple times. We've seen Captain America multiple times. We've seen Thor multiple times. It's time for something new. It's time for something fresh. It's such a large universe. Let's get back on track. There are so many stories to tell. You know, it doesn't have to be relegated to just those characters that they had the rights to at the time that they launched Marvel Studios. You know, now they can dip their toe in the ocean instead of a pool. You have the X-Men. And the X-Men for their time, well, at 20th Century Fox did what they did. It just like Marvel, it had hits and it had a lot of misses, and it was it was hard to get through those films at times because you get a good one and you get two bad ones. You get a good one, you get two bad ones. You get a good. It was just brutal to watch, but the X-Men is such a beloved property. The X-Men, to me, this is why I love the X-Men right here. It covers so much. Everybody can relate to the X-Men if you really strip it down to its bones. Let me give you an example. If you look at the Justice League in DC is basically gods. Those are the Greek gods in comic book form. Superman is basically a god. Wonder Woman is a god. Aquaman is a god. The Flash, you can make an argument. Even Batman, who was my all-time favorite comic book character, he can be one. They're gods. They really can't relate to humans. So to a degree, but not so much. Then we move back over to Marvel. You look at the Avengers. The Hulk is, Iron Man. He's a rich, philanthropist, playboy. Captain America, an old man with a shield. Thor is a god. That's what I'm trying. They're not really grounded characters. Justice League takes on global threats. The Avengers take on global threats. Now, X-Men do take on global threats, but only because they have to. When it gets really, really bad, when they really have to put rubber to the road, that's when they come into play. But for the most part, they're grounded, and for the most part, they're not the celebrated heroes as the ones I just named, whether it's in DC or Marvel. They're not celebrated. They're ridiculed. They're bullied. They're treated as minorities. That's how you can really relate. They're treated like second-class citizens. They're not even treated as humans. They're not called humans. They're called mutants. People don't treat them like humans. Society. And they represent so many different groups that are bullied and shunned from society. Back in the 60s, during the Jim Crow era, during the Civil Rights Movement, they represented the black movement. They represent the LGBTQ community. They represent all of these different quote unquote lower class communities around the world. And despite all that, they still have superpowers nonetheless, and they still fight for humanity's sake. And that's why I loved the X-Men for what they were. In the comics, moving on to the animated series from the 90s to now with X-Men 97, with this new chapter that's about to arise in the MCU and going forward. I just love the X-Men. Always have. The first comic book I ever read featured an X-Man in it. It was a Captain America comic book. It was my brother's comic book. And I picked it up, and it was a team up with Captain America and Wolverine. Because Captain America was in Canada fighting something. I forgot what it was. But he teamed up with Wolverine. And I was intrigued by Wolverine. I had a closeness to that character because he's short. He's one of the shortest characters in the comic books, at least hero-wise, and is able to hold his own with all the other superheroes inside of the Marvel universe. And so I always connected to Wolverine because of his height. Me being a height deficient person myself. And so I gravitated to him, but he wasn't my favorite X-Men. I just loved his character. But moving on, you may wonder why 20th Century Fox had the rights to the X-Men. Why were they separated from the MCU proper? Well, there's a lot of characters that are separated from the MCU. That's because in the 90s, Marvel Comics was just a breath away from being bankrupt, from going out of business. Even to the point DC Comics almost bought them. It was very close to DC owning Marvel Comics, which would have been very interesting if that would have took place. But in a last dish effort to keep the company, they started selling the film rights to their characters. That's why Spider-Man is over at Sony. That's why the X-Men and the Fantastic Four was at Fox. The Incredible Hulk was at Universal Pictures. They just started selling them so they can stay afloat. And I guess at that point they figured, well, we'll never make movies on our own with these characters. We'll never open up our own studio. But they should have waited. 20 years later, they end up opening up their own studio. And the rest, as we say, is history. But at the time, they had to do it. They had to do it. And so 20th Century Fox, once they got the rights, they immediately started hiring writers, trying to get a film off the ground because of the popularity of the X-Men around this time, you know, with the animated series going on, with the popular arcade game that was going on. Everybody loved the X-Men. And then there was a real comic boom in the mid 80s. I mean, in the 80s and in the mid 90s as well, especially after the death of Superman comics that came out around that time, really jolted some life into comic book reading, because quite honestly, that's what got me back into comics, because I had stopped reading them for a while. And then when the news broke that they were going to kill Superman, I was like, wait, what? What? And so, of course, I had to read the comics. I was like, man, how are they going to do this? And who is going to kill him? You know, and that was the start of my dive back into comic books around that time. Because I think around that age, that's when I found out that, hey, girls like me for some reason. And I definitely like them back. So my mind and my focus was solely on the females. And so when I got back, when I found out that I wasn't all that with the females, I started to dive back into the comic books. But anywho's, yeah, around this time, it really got popular, especially the X-Men. So 20th Century Fox was trying to get it together. And eventually, in the year 2000, we finally got a live-action X-Men film. And the rest, as we say, is history. 13 films under the 20th Century Fox banner of the X-Men films. And as I stated before, there were a few that was pretty good. There was a couple that was great. And then the rest. And then the rest of them. My God. But it was 13 films in this franchise. And today, in honor of Deadpool and Wolverine being released in theaters, making its debut in the MCU, bringing this, I guess you could say, this franchise to a degree into the MCU, because those two characters are part of this franchise that we're going over today, and they are entering the MCU proper. And so to celebrate that monumental event, I decided that today we're going to rank all 13 films in the Fox X-Men film franchise. And let me tell you something. This list, even though it seemed easy, you know, because you know which one of these movies are bad and which ones are good. You know, the top three is pretty easy. I'm pretty sure all of us out there who is listening, who have watched these movies, we all pretty much have the same top three. Maybe not in the same order, but they're up there. You know which ones are good, or dare I say great. If you look at the bottom three, I'm pretty sure we all have the same bottom three on this list. They are horrible films, and everybody universally agrees that these films are horrible. It's the ones in the middle that where it got difficult. It got a little difficult there because, quite honestly, there were some that I thought was going to be lower, and I rewatched these all 13 films. Me and my daughter rewatched them, and upon rewatch, films that I thought were horrible weren't that bad. I don't know if it's because I looked at them with different eyes. I'm just a smidge bit wiser now than when I first watched them in the theaters, and I have a deeper appreciation for them. And so I ranked them up a little high. One in particular, I know people are going to be probably throw their phones or their laptops or whatever you're listening to this show on. And I thank you, by the way. I know you're probably going to pull your hair out when I when I tell you the position of one particular film. But I had to be honest with myself. I'm like, you know what? This movie isn't bad. This movie is not that bad. Now, I'm going to explain why I have every single film ranked where they are. We're not going to review each and every film. We'll be here all day. And so I'm just going to give my reasoning as to why each film is placed where they placed, and it hopefully maybe inspire you to make your own list, of these films, because these films are important. For better or worse, they're important because the X-Men franchise, when it launched in 2000, that's what really kind of got the ball rolling on the comic book movie frenzy. You can go back to Blade. Blade really is the one who lit the fuse for comic book films. X-Men, I believe, is the one who threw the grenade. And this is why we have the MCU. This is why we have DC films starting their cinematic universe and so on and so forth. It all started with the X-Men because of the success, how successful this franchise was. This franchise grossed over $6 billion over 13 films. That's not bad. That's not bad. And so we're going to go through this list of films here that we're going to go from worst to first. And so we're going to start with number 13. And this shouldn't be a shock to nobody on God's green earth, which one I consider the worst X-Men film of all time. This film in particular may even be the worst comic book movie ever made. This may and I know there's Batman and Robin. I know that movie exists. I know Fantastic Four, the one with Miles Teller and Michael B. Jordan. I know that movie exists. But there are redeemable qualities in those films. Not many, maybe one or two. They still stink. But at least there are some redeemable scenes throughout those movies. One or two. In this film, there's not one. Not one. And upon rewatch, I was sitting there. It was like sitting in a dentist chair full of Novocaine, and the Novocaine wore off mid teeth being pulled out of your mouth. This didn't happen to me before, so I know how painful this can be. But I got a flashback to that while watching this movie. It was none other than the 2009 X-Men Origins Wolverine. Oh my God, this movie was horrible. I understand why X-Men or why 20th Century Fox, they decided to make Wolverine the guy, the lead in all of these films in this franchise. And I get it because he's a popular character. Hugh Jackman is amazing as Wolverine. We're going to see him yet again in Deadpool and Wolverine. But uh, there's more to this franchise than just Wolverine. Now, keep in mind, we got 3 Wolverine films on this list, 3 solo Wolverine films. And there were other characters. It's called X-Men, not X-Man. It's not Wolverine's show. But I understand he's a popular character. I get it. I get it. But I would love to see an origin of Storm. I would have loved to see an origin of Magneto. You know, we got snippets of it throughout the franchise. I would love to see them dedicate a whole movie to that character, to even Charles Xavier. You know, Jean Grey. Jean Grey is such an important character in the X-Men lore. That's who you need to focus on, you know? But unfortunately, we didn't get that. Now, since this is the route they decided to take, fine. We're going to go down the Wolverine train. At least give us something exciting. Give us something that makes sense. This movie made no sense whatsoever. This is the only film out of 13 movies in this franchise that had Gambit. Gambit is another popular character in the X-Men lore. And for some strange reason, he was never in the mainline films. Never. But he shows up in this in pretty much a glorified cameo, played by Taylor Kitsch. And I think Taylor Kitsch did a good job for what he was given. This was around the time when Hollywood was trying to make Taylor Kitsch something, trying to make him a movie star, but it just didn't work out. But I don't think it's his fault. I actually like Taylor Kitsch. But he did the best he could. But what he was given was just horrible. It made no sense. The timeline doesn't line up with the rest of the films. You know, characters are aged a certain way that if they met up later on, 10, 15 years later, it just don't line up at all. None of it made sense. The CGI was horrible. The less said about Wolverine claws in this movie, the better. You know, and to think that in the original film made in 2000, the CGI was perfect with the claws. How do you digress? I don't understand. I don't get it. The action was lame. The story was lame. Everything was lame. Even Hugh Jackman was lame. And that's saying something because he owns this role. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine, in my humble opinion. You know, I mentioned earlier how Wolverine, I connected with that character because he's 5'2" in the comics, you know, even though I'm taller than that, but he's 5'2" in the comics. Hugh Jackman is like 6'4" or something like that. And it didn't even bother me. It still doesn't bother me to this day that he's a foot taller than what he's supposed to be in the comic books because he nails the character. You know, that's like Batman. Batman is 6'4" in the comic books, or 6'3" in the comic books. Michael Keaton is like 5'8". I didn't care because Michael Keaton knew the character. And same thing here. Hugh Jackman knows the character. Not in this movie. This is the only bad Wolverine performance by Hugh Jackman in the entire franchise. It's amazing. It's almost, this movie's so bad, it's almost to the point you want to bump it up higher on the list for it achieving this level of mediocrity, because it's virtually impossible to do it, but they pulled it off. You know, this was so lame. It was a lame film. Coming in at number 13 is X-Men Origins Wolverine, the worst X-Men film in the entire franchise. And it's not even close. It's not even close. My daughter, when we were discussing the list, and she was like, you really got such and such here and such there. And I explained to her why. And when we came to these like bottom 3 here, and she was like, nah, I would switch this one and switch that. No, you can't. It's really impossible. You know, basically the bottom 3 on this list are equally bad, but I can only give the worst to one. Now they can all share the title of being the worst because they are all the worst. These bottom three, and it's not even close. Now from 10 to 1, they're all right films. There's some shaky films in there, but they're watchable. These bottom three, they're unwatchable. Unwatchable. I already listed X-Men Origin Wolverine. Number 12 is also unwatchable. New Mutants, which came out in 2020. New Mutants was a film that they hyped up to be a horror film inside of the X-Men universe. Color me intrigued because I was excited to hear that for this reason. When people now, for the past couple of years has been talking about superhero fatigue, and there is a little truth to that because the same punchy, smashy every superhero movie, it can get boring. It can get tiresome, repetitive. And so you got to kind of, sprinkle some salt on it, dash a little hot sauce on it, if you will, change up the genre a little bit, like Captain America did. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. That was a spy thriller. Ant-Man was a heist film. You get what I'm trying to say? It's they got to switch it up, do something different. Guardians of the Galaxy, that wasn't your typical superhero team, and so you got to kind of change it up every now and then. And so when you say a horror film inside of a comic book movie, oh man, this ought to be interesting. And I didn't follow the New Mutants in the comics. I know of them, but I never read it. So I was excited to hear this because this is a genre that we didn't or haven't gotten in this particular category of film. And X-Men, it fits perfectly. And on top of that, you have a crop of real good young talent in front of the camera. You have Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones in this movie. You have Anya Taylor-Joy in this movie. You have Charlie Heaton, who was in Stranger Things or is in Stranger Things in this movie. What happened? What happened? This movie was bad. It was boring. The story was uninspiring. Couldn't get behind any character. There was no character development, I felt. It was just lame, man. This was supposed to be a haunted house type feel. This movie looks like it was butchered in the editing room. It feels like a good movie was in there somewhere, but unfortunately they left all the good on the cutting room floor. That's what it felt like. It just looked like they sabotaged this movie on purpose. It was not good. That's all I can say. There's nothing else to say about it. It was nothing entertaining about this movie. It's not one scene in this movie, and I've seen it 3 times. Most recently, about a month ago, I watched this movie, and I still can't tell you one part of this movie. I can't tell you one thing that happened in it because it's so forgettable. And I can remember parts of X-Men Origins Wolverine, but not for good reasons. It's just to laugh at, but here it is just forgettable. This is one of the worst X-Men films and also one of the worst comic book films ever made. Now, if I was going to flip it, I would have almost, to be honest with you, when I initially made this list, I made this list about 3 months ago, and the New Mutants was at the bottom. It was the worst. But between that time and after about 4 revisions of this list and rewatches of all of these films, it flipped. It did flip because that X-Men Origins was just horrible. But this was at one point at the bottom. But like I said, they can share the honor of being the worst, in my humble opinion, along with number 11. And number 11, I remember walking out the theater for this movie. I went to go see it with a buddy of mine who passed away uh, a few years back. And he was kind of stoic after we left out of there. He really wasn't talking, but I was hyped up. I remember being excited when I saw this, telling him that I enjoyed the film, that I thought it was one of the best X-Men films ever made. And he never said a word. And then a few months later, when it came out on Blu-ray, I bought it. And I came home, I watched it, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I was watching. I don't know what this is. Is this the same movie? I don't remember it being this bad. It was a weird experience watching it at home. And then I watched it a couple of more times. I'm like, man, this movie is horrible. And all of a sudden, I rewatched it again for this show, and yeah, it was confirmed. This movie is just that bad. It is the 2006 film X-Men: The Last Stand. This was their first attempt at the Dark Phoenix saga storyline. I don't know. And yes, you heard me right. First attempt, because they're going to try it again. I don't know what happened here. I honestly don't know what was the thinking in this film. Number one, the Dark Phoenix saga was the B storyline. It was the subplot in this film. That wasn't even the main story in this film. The main story was the Gifted storyline from the comics, where they had the mutant cure. Now, that's fine, because that was a cool comic book run. But if you was going to do that, just do that. Leave the Dark Phoenix alone, because the Dark Phoenix saga deserves a film of his own, which we end up getting later on, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But this was like a hodgepodge of stuff that I don't know why they tried to jam pack so many stories in here and had the audacity to try to pull on your heartstrings. I was sitting there like, man, this is not moving me. For the Professor X death, I wasn't moved. For the Jean Grey death, I wasn't moved. None of that moved me. For the Cyclops death that we didn't even get to see on screen, I wasn't moved. It did nothing for me. You know, the decision by Rogue to take the cure was stupid. That's another character who was completely disrespected throughout this entire franchise. Rogue is one of the most powerful mutants, if not beings, on Earth. But for some strange reason, they just dumbed her down. And I'm not talking intelligent wise, but power wise. They muted her powers to a degree. And she was like an afterthought, you know, with the exception of the first film when she was like the MacGuffin of the movie. But after that, Rogue was just there. She was a supporting character, in most cases a glorified cameo throughout the films. And so when she took the cure in this movie, it was like, so you don't do nothing, and she has done nothing to contribute to the X-Men in this franchise. And so that didn't have the feel, you know. It was just an unbelievably disappointing film. I don't know what I was thinking back in 2006. I guess I was just excited for comic book movies. I really settled on that. You know, this is pre MCU. This is pre Man of Steel and all that good stuff. So we didn't get good comic book movies. So when we got all right watchable comic book movies on the big screen, I was excited, and I didn't really poo-poo on them. But now that I've seen better and I know better, this movie is horrible. X-Men: The Last Stand comes in at number 11. Now we move on to the top 10 of this list. Coming in at number 10 is the 2016 film X-Men Apocalypse. Yes, baby. Apocalypse. Oh boy, how can I describe Apocalypse? Apocalypse, once again, another film with a lot of potential. Hit on a couple of notes, drop the ball on others. Starting with the character of Apocalypse, they really messed that character up. Apocalypse is up there with a Thanos. He's up there with Darkseid over at DC. I'm not saying he's that cold of a villain, you know, but he is one of the main villains, man. He is that much of a threat, I feel like, globally. He can take over the planet, really. He's immortal to an extent. You know, he's that big of a threat. Really, he is a global threat. I believe in the comics a couple of times. Uh, the Avengers had to come in and help the X-Men when it came to Apocalypse. You know, that's how powerful he is. Not in this movie though. This movie had him as a mustache twirling villain. It was just a waste of a really, really good character. And you had Oscar Isaacs, who is one of the best actors working right now. How? I mean, he just did not fit the role. He did not fit the role. As great as an actor as he did not fit that role. And I know he said he's a comic book fan, and so I guess he felt this was his best chance to be in a comic book movie, but he could have waited a few years because he was initially cast as Moon Knight, that show that we got on Disney Plus a couple of years ago, which less said about that, the better. But he is a real good actor. I mean, borderline great actor, but he was horribly miscast in this role. This was around the time when Jennifer Lawrence was really starting to mail in her performances when it came to Mystique, and she mailed it in on this one. she mailed it in on this one big time. And it radiated, man. You could really tell she did not want to be there. And it affected the rest of the cast, I felt. You know what I'm saying? It just felt like she was made to stay there with a gun to her head. And it showed. It showed. And this is a 2-time Academy Award winning actress. And so it isn't like she's a bad actress. So for her to give a bad performance, I can't help but to think she just did not want to be there. And it showed. James McAvoy was great. Michael Fassbender was great. Shoehorning in Storm's origin story in this film in like a scene was dumb to me. It was really, it didn't show respect to that character because once again, Storm, a huge character in the X-Men lore, never has gotten her proper props, I should say, in this franchise. So it really bothered me that they just did a throwaway origin for her character in this film. This movie is not a rewatchable type of film, but if I had to choose between this and the previous 3 I stated, I would watch this again. But overall, it still lands at number 10, X-Men Apocalypse. Moving on to number 9, this is where the movies start to get decent, really decent. And like I said, gonna be some shocks and surprises here, one in particular. But coming in at number 9 is the 2013 film, The Wolverine. The Wolverine, which was their second attempt at a Wolverine standalone film, it got much better. It got much, much better. If you can't tell, the fact that it's up here on this high on the list, but it was a good film. It could have been higher if it wasn't for the third act of that film. The third act is what threw off this movie. Everything else was great. I loved the story. This is ripped from the comics. Everything was pretty in line with what I read in the comics about this story about Wolverine going to Japan. All that was cool. All him with his powers being stripped away and all this here, cool. Having that love story in Japan was amazing. I loved it. It was told very well. No problems with it. Then we get to the third act, and it kind of just it just blew up. It fell apart. I guess the studio felt we need to have a big punchy, smashy comic book fight at the end, and that's what we got. And it was just unnecessary. Unnecessary. It felt out of place in this film. You know, this was telling a deep story, and then we just got into silliness at the end, and it hurt the movie. But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought this was an excellent film, a surefire redemption from X-Men Origins. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I have fond memories of watching this movie because I watched this film at Disney World the weekend it came out. Me and the family was on vacation in Disney World, and I really wanted to see the Wolverine. And we went to the movie theater that's on at the park, and it was a cool theater, by the way. I would go back to Disney World just to go to that theater, but yeah, that's where I saw the Wolverine, and I had a good time and walked away fairly happy. I was happy, and when I rewatched it, I had the same feeling. I was like, okay, this is decent. This is good. They redeemed themselves in this film. That film was directed by James Mangold, and we're going to hear his name again a little later on. But yes, the Wolverine comes in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, X-Men First Class, which came out in 2011. This was set up to be a kind of a soft reboot of the franchise, and an origin story of these characters. And I got it. Around this time, it was the smart play to start over, start from scratch. Let's do this different because the OG cast was getting a little stale, and so let's hype it up, and older, by the way. And so let's do something different. Let's reboot this franchise. Smart move, really good movie. I really had no problems with this film. I could, especially when they announced the casting, and I saw them all in action. I was like, oh my god, I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it was possible that somebody could go toe to toe with Patrick Stewart in the role of Charles Xavier. But James McAvoy killed it. I mean, he did an excellent job. Who can go toe to toe with Ian McKellen as Magneto? Michael Fassbender is probably better than Ian McKellen, and Ian McKellen is phenomenal in the role, but Michael Fassbender never. And I will go to my dying day screaming that Michael Fassbender gave it his all in every single appearance as this character. Even when the movie was hot garbage, he gave it his all. He wasn't the problem. He made it known he wasn't the problem. And he gave an excellent performance, and it started in this film. Everything about this was pretty good, with the exception of killing the Darwin character, which makes no sense because that's the one character you can't kill, but they managed to kill him off in this movie. Characters turning at the end, joining with Magneto for no reason whatsoever. No motivations, no setup. They didn't really give a reason why they joined. They just joined the bad guys just to be with the bad guys. It was stupid. But aside from those two little things and a couple of, little nitpicks throughout the film, I really didn't have a problem with this. I enjoyed this for the most part. X-Men First Class comes in at number 8. Right above that at number 7, Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 from the year 2018 comes in at number 7. This character of Deadpool is he is what he is. Either you love it or you hate it. There's no in between. I just so happen to love that character, and I love Reynolds as this character. Is this movie as good as the first film? Obviously not, because we haven't it hasn't popped up on the list yet. But at the same time, it is still a good film, a watchable film. It's funny. I think this movie is comparing it to the first one. It's heavily leaning into the comedy as opposed to the first film, which of course heavy in the comedy, but there was still a deep love story there. There was some dramatic moments there as well in that first film, but we'll touch in on that in a few. But this film was just a straight up screwball comedy, I felt. But it was still watchable, still enjoyable, still honored the character of Deadpool. I liked Josh Brolin's portrayal as Cable in this film, which is funny because Josh Brolin is also Thanos in the Avengers films. He's Thanos, and if I'm not mistaken, in 2018, that's when Infinity War came out. And so you had Josh Brolin being Thanos and Cable in the same year. That is crazy. I just not thought about. I didn't put that together, and I went and seen those movies that year and never thought about it like that. But yes, Josh Brolin, but he did excellent in both roles. I enjoyed him here. Yeah, everything worked for me with the exception of it just felt like too much comedy, you know. And I know these are comedy films. I know that Deadpool is a funny character. I know that Ryan Reynolds is a comedic actor. So it's not a shock, but I just wanted more of the heart that we got in the first film. But it's still excellent. It comes in at number 7. Now, coming in at number 6 is the film that I'm pretty sure is going to anger a lot of people. Why is it this high? And you probably know what it is because you haven't heard it mentioned yet. But I'm just being honest with myself, people. Coming in at number 6 is the 2019 Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is number 6 on the list. It almost got higher, but it comes in at number 6. It actually it was at 5. Let me just be transparent with you all. It was at number 5, but I put the movie that's currently at number 5 there for nostalgic purposes. Just to be honest with you, I just couldn't do it. By right, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't put Dark Phoenix over it. But I really wanted to do it. But here it is at number 6. And I know a lot of people hate this movie. I know the critics tore it apart in 2019, and I was one of them. I did not like this movie in 2019. Didn't like it, couldn't stand it. As a matter of fact, when it came on television a couple of years ago, and I saw it was on, and I kept scrolling. I did not want to watch it. It was that bad, I felt, in 2019. Oh, but we did the rewatch. And my daughter was like, Dad, I want to see it. So we went ahead, clicked on it, watched it. And I was sitting there like, wait, this movie isn't that bad. And, you know, midway through it, I was like, I don't remember it being this interesting. This movie is really pretty good so far. And we started to get to the end, and we got closer to the end. I'm like, wait, we're coming up to the end of this movie, and I'm not mad yet. I remember being mad watching this movie. And so we get to the very end, the credits start to roll, and I'm like, what? Why did I not like this movie? And my daughter turned to me and said, Dad, didn't you don't like this, huh? I said, no, actually I do. I was like, yeah. She was like, yeah, me too. And I was like, this was good. Is it great? No. Did they give the honor to the Dark Phoenix saga? No, they fumbled the ball again. They did not do the Dark Phoenix saga right. But this movie was good. It was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. It was very entertaining. I'm being real. Now, the problems with this movie was the villain. The villain was super weak. The story, it felt kind of crammed. You didn't really feel the scale of what was going on, the real threat of what was going on. Like I said, they fumbled this saga. But as far as a character study into Jean Grey, I thought this was excellent. We really got into Jean Grey's mind, her trauma, if you will. And it was heartbreaking throughout the film, the what she's struggling with, This was like a PSA for mental health. And it really worked. And I think it worked wonders, to be honest with you. I feel people should give this another chance. This movie is not as bad as initially advertised. This was a really good film. Is it great? No. No, it's not. But it is watchable, and I think it doesn't deserve the flack that it has gotten over the past 5 years. I think it's really a good movie. So Dark Phoenix comes in at number 6. The movie I just could not put it over. And like I said, it's pure nostalgia. Just keeping a buck with you. It is X-Men from 2000. Yes, the one that started it all. I couldn't put it over that. And now X-Men, the very first X-Men, keep in mind, it's 2000. Everything is limited. The special effects is limited. The storytelling is limited because, like I said to start off the show, comic book movies, superhero movies, those weren't the focus of Hollywood. So they didn't get the budget. They didn't get the full arsenal of backing from a studio. So you had to really put that film together, any film in this genre around this time, put it together with duct tape and bubble gum. But I think this was put together fairly well. Let's keep in mind, if that film fails, we're not talking right now. If this film fails, we're not talking about the MCU. There's no comic book movies going to be made after this. That's how much weight that was on the shoulders of Bryan Singer and the filmmakers and the actors and everybody involved to put this film together. And I think they did an excellent job. Did they make changes? Yes, they all do. Even in the MCU, they make changes. That's unavoidable. But it was enjoyable. I wish we could have got the original outfits, the original costumes from the comics, but we didn't get them. Fine. Around this era, everything was in black. Everybody was in black leather. And so that's what they went with, especially after The Matrix came out. Everything was in black leather. So everybody wanted to copy Neo. And so that's fine. But I did enjoy it. This film gave us Hugh Jackman, the first appearance of Hugh Jackman in the role. Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry as Storm, who was brutally miscast. And I love Halle Berry, God bless her soul. But she is no Storm. This is the only film. This goes down as the only film in the entire franchise that Halle Berry attempted to give us an African accent. And it was so bad, she never used it again. It was that bad. And I was like, man, why is she even trying this? And why are they allowing her to try this, man? This is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for her. But in all jokes aside, I did love this movie. It felt like a comic book movie. It didn't feel like it was trying to do anything different. It just felt like an X-Men movie. And so it was amply titled. X-Men from the year 2000 comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is Deadpool from 2016. The first film in, I guess you could say, trilogy now, in the Deadpool trilogy. This movie, and I once described it as the most accurate comic book movie ever made, and I still feel that way. Pay attention to what I said. The most accurate comic book movie ever made, not the greatest, just the most accurate. And the reason it's the most accurate is because the character of Wade Wilson, aka Deadpool, is exactly like he is in the comic books. They did not change a thing. This is who he is. He is exactly like this in the comics. And I loved it. Ryan Reynolds was born to play this role. It's amazing to me that our first look at Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool was in X-Men Origins Wolverine. And that's embarrassing. They messed that character up so much. We almost didn't get Deadpool. They did not, Fox did not want to make a Deadpool film after X-Men Origins Wolverine, understandably so. But Ryan Reynolds and his team, they pushed, and they finally gave us this film, and I'm glad for it. This was just perfect to me. It was small. It didn't try to be Avengers. It was just Deadpool. And it told this beautiful love story. Beautiful love story. Who knew? Who knew this was we were going to get that in this film, but we got it. And I mean, they nailed it. Loved it. Can't wait for Deadpool and Wolverine. This is a match made in heaven. But yes, Deadpool from 2016 comes in at number 4. And we have arrived at the top 3 X-Men films of all time. And this is funny because I said that the top 3 didn't move, but that's actually a lie because they did. But they stayed. These 3 films were there. No matter what version of this list that I made, these 3 films were in the top 3. But at one point or another, they all switched. At one point in time or another. That was before I did the full franchise rewatch. So once I did the rewatch, it settled. Now, if I do this list in another 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it may change, but not really. Not really. This is really the concreted, etched in stone list. And so coming in at number 3 is a film that for a long time, and I'm talking maybe 10 to 15 years, give or take, I consider this the greatest comic book movie of all time. No cap. It's not even up for debate around that time. Movies have surpassed it since, of course, because we got 2 more movies on this list alone. But for a long while, from 2003 to maybe 2015, 2016, this was the greatest comic book movie ever made, in my humble opinion. And it is X2, X-Men United, the sequel to X-Men. And I'm telling you, I remember going to the theater to watch this. And me and a couple of friends of mine were sitting in there, and all of a sudden we get to the end of this movie. The movie ain't even off yet. The movie's not even off. And my friend turns to me because he couldn't stand the first X-Men. He just didn't like it, because it wasn't like the comics or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I can understand your gripe, but I still enjoyed the movie, whatever. But we're sitting in there for this one, And he turns to me because he was in the row in front of me, and he said, "Man, this is X-Men." And this was like during the climax in the third act. He just turned, "This is X-Men," and said it loud. Everybody in there just looked, but everybody agreed. They were like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is it, man. This movie is fire." This movie was so good. When I rewatched it about a month ago, I was it's like watching it for the first time. It still holds up to this day. And it's been what, 21 years? I love this movie. Love X-Men 2, X-Men United. My God, from beginning to end, the action is perfect. The villain is perfect with Stryker, played beautifully by Brian Cox. You know, the setup to the Dark Phoenix saga, which it was supposed to do, but they fumbled the ball in the last stand. But the setup at the end of this movie was amazing. Everything was on point. I love this movie, and I'm telling you, it was it still is one of the best comic book movies ever made. Hands down, can't be touched. It still holds up. The effects still hold up. The story, the acting, everything. Mwah, chef's kiss. X2, X-Men United comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is an X-Men film that I would like to describe as the Avengers Endgame version of X-Men. And this is X-Men Days of Future Past, which came out in 2014. Yes, this movie did it first. It wasn't the MCU with the Avengers. This movie did it first because this movie combined all of the X-Men. The OG cast with Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Hugh Jackman, all of the OG cast with the new cast from the first class, I guess you could say, with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender and so on, Jennifer Lawrence, all of them in one film. In one film, because this film deals with time travel and stopping trying to stop basically the apocalypse, but not the apocalypse from the character that is, but just the extinction of mutants. And we get Sentinels in action in this movie. We get Quicksilver in that epic scene when they break Magneto out of that prison, you know, the speed scene when everything was in slow motion and all that. It was just mind blowing. This movie had everything. It had everything. Great acting, great story, great visual effects. I mean, the tension was thick in this film. It was a juggernaut of a movie, you know, no pun intended. It was that big of a film. And I mean, if it wasn't for number one, this would be number one, but number one is just number one, without a question. But this film is amazing. X-Men Days of Future Past comes in at number 2. So we've arrived at the number 1 X-Men film of all time. This film, it surpasses the genre. This is not really a comic book film or a superhero film in my eyes. This is just an amazing film. This is cinema. This is a film that I felt should have been nominated for Best Picture, but it wasn't. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay or Adapted Screenplay, but it should have been nominated for Best Picture. This film, every time I watched it, I cried at the end. I was just tore up from the floor up every time. When my daughter watched it with me the last time, she was tore up. She was on the sofa in the fetal position, just wailing, crying. I mean, a visceral reaction to this. This film is the number 1 X-Men film of all time. The 2017 Logan. Logan is a film, like I said, it transcends the genre. This is more than a superhero film. This is more than a comic book film. This was a Western. This was a family film. You had Logan, you had Charles Xavier, and you had X-23. This family. It was a father-son story with Wolverine and Professor X. It was a father-daughter story with Wolverine and X-23. It was a film about grief. It was a film about guilt. It was a film about mental health. It covered so much, and the weight of this character, of Logan, of Wolverine, that we followed for over 20 years. And Hugh Jackman to get this perfect send off at the end of this movie. And for it all, this film was just a combination of all of those films. This character going through what he went through all these years, outliving all of his friends, his loved ones, and the guilt of everything that he did throughout his life, and coming to terms with that. And it was just a brutal film, to say it was a comic book movie. This, you know what I'm saying? It's so much more. It's so much more than that. But at the end of the day, it's one of the greatest comic book movies ever. I don't care if it's the Fox X-Men films, the MCU, the DCU. I don't care. This film is up there. And also, this is also one of the reasons I was kind of skeptical about Hugh Jackman coming back for the Deadpool film. Because I was like, man, we got the perfect send-off, bro. Don't come back and ruin it. Don't ruin it. Because that was perfect. It was perfectly done in Logan. But they claim that this is a different Wolverine, a different variant, and all this here. All right, that's fine. But I was so satisfied, yet hurt and broken up. And, and I hate to do this, keep bringing this up. But this was maybe a year or two removed from when my dad died. And when I went to the theater to see this, and and this happened, and I knew that Wolverine was going to die at the end of this movie. Everybody knew that. But I don't know, man. It's just the way it happened and the way that it played out, and the relationship that had grown between him and X-23. It cut me deep. And so I bring that up to say maybe that affects me in a way. Maybe that's a biased opinion why I have it at number one, but I don't think it is. I don't think it is. This was just awesome, man. James Mangold yet again directs this film. He directed the Wolverine as well. Maybe they should have hired him to direct X-Men Origins Wolverine, and we wouldn't have had that problem. But in any event, great job. And plus, they filmed it down here in New Orleans, so that's a plus as well. Yes, that is the list, ladies and gentlemen. Logan comes in at number one. Let's recap. Starting at number 13, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Number 12, The New Mutants. Number 11, X-Men The Last Stand. Number 10, X-Men Apocalypse. Number 9, The Wolverine. Number 8, X-Men First Class. Number 7, Deadpool 2. At number 6, Dark Phoenix. At number 5, X-Men from the year 2000. Number 4, Deadpool. Number 3, X2, X-Men United. Number 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. And coming in at number 1, Logan. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, those are the 20th Century Fox X-Men films that we've received from the year 2000 all the way to 2020. And like I said, there was a lot of misses here, but there were some hits. And even in the misses, there were some decent things that happened in those movies. Some of them, one of them, nothing decent happened in, but they were decent movies. but I enjoyed that franchise. That was an entertaining franchise, and I'm happy to see it come to the MCU and get the MCU treatment. I'm excited to see how Deadpool and Wolverine play out. Allegedly, there will be a lot of cameos from a lot of characters who appeared in all of these films that we mentioned here today. So that's exciting. I hope you got your tickets. I just bought mine because I don't want to get played when I walk up to the theater this weekend to watch it. But I am excited for Deadpool and Wolverine. I would love to know, what is your list? What do you think is number one? What do you think is number 13? Do you agree or disagree with my list? Do you think certain films should be lower, certain films should be higher? I would love to know. And the best way to let me know is by email. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also let me know on social media. Just search for the KB Radio Network. You can let me know in the comments over on YouTube, the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube. Subscribe and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we ranked all 13 X-Men films from 20th Century Fox. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.